Welcome to our Monday Zoom. We're so thrilled to have David Luneau tell us about his 2004 video in Arkansas. We've all profited from David's work. And David, really, you restarted this, I think it's fair to say. So we owe you a great debt. So we're thrilled to have you tonight. And we will just get through our preliminaries and then get on to the star of our show. We're Mission Ivorybill. We're a grassroots organization. Our plan was to start the 5-year search for the Ivorybill this year, 2022. And we started and we're off to, it's going great. And we want to do the thing that has never been done, is search for the Ivorybill throughout its habitat. And that will take, a long time. And those have pointed out, I'm not sure you could do it over 5 years, but we really want to involve local people. It's much easier to train outdoors persons to identify Ivorybills rather than to train birders to be in the Ivorybill woods. And David, you'd appreciate, your brother Guy took the photo on the right. That was a 100-degree day nearby you to view. So we're thrilled to have y'all. And our outreach group is the Louisiana Wilds, and we're purposely hunter orange and hunter green because we think hunters are the key to the success of the Ivorybill. And we owe hunters a great debt because they foot the bill for our public lands in many ways. So, but that's the Louisiana Wilds. The idea is to reach that thing inside of all of us that makes us want to howl at the moon. So we're thrilled to have you. But again, we're here for Mission Ivorybill. Please email us. We're trying to gather, a group of people around the Ivorybill to study the Ivorybill, because I'm sure David has schooled lots of us. There's so many confounding mysteries about the Ivorybill. And so it's a really fun issue. I enjoy the mystery. And so we say we're always seeking truth. So we need everybody involved. Thank you so much for being here. So, setting the context for this, as many of you know, that David's video was taken in April of 2004. And then in April 28, 2005, this is the news release from the Department of the Interior. And probably you all know, but the Department of Interior is, the United States Fish and Wildlife Service is a part of the Department of Interior. So this was the great news release about the once thought extinct Ivory-billed woodpecker rediscovered in Arkansas. It wasn't just any old news release. It was the official news release of the Department of Interior. And in there, as you can see, the action by Secretary Norton, that's Secretary of the Interior. And this is just announcing how they knew that the Ivorybill had been rediscovered, that the Ivorybill was in fact not extinct. The primary evidence consists of video footage, which is David Luneau's video footage. So the reason I bring this up is you get people who tell you, so hey, I won't go into the negative too much, but I've been lectured today about how no one would accept David Luneau's video. Well, tell it to the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, which accepted David's video. But when you go back, this is one of the things that really troubles me. So that was from their news release. And then Lauren, I said, I asked her to look it up for me. So she looked up the news release now, and they've pulled it. Your publicly paid for United States Fish and Wildlife Service has removed their announcement from 2005. No discussion of, well, we've looked at it and we've decided, no, they've just removed it. So this is continuing a trend which is troubling, and I hope will change soon. Yeah. As Lauren pointed out, that's, after they set the proposal, but as many of you know, we started this weekly Zoom series. This is our 18th Monday night Zoom. We started it because we thought the extinction proposal was not based on science. And the more we've looked at it, the more we've discovered it's in fact not based on science. So another thing that I'll get from people is regarding David Luneau's video is, well, no bird records committee would accept it. Well, in fact, the only relevant bird records committee, the Arkansas Bird Records Committee, did accept it, and it's still on the Arkansas bird list. So with that, I just wanted to set the context and say how thrilled we are to have David tonight, and I'll turn it over to David Luneau.
Thank you, Matt. All right, I'm going to go through the process here of sharing my screen. Start the PowerPoint presentation. This is more than just a video analysis. I just like short titles, so I just called it video analysis. There's a lot of historical things in here, a lot of little anecdotes, things I ran into along the way that I hope you find interesting. But let me just give you a quick background for those of you who weren't here 2 weeks ago, I think, when I gave a short talk. I'm not an ornithologist. I'm a birder, just a hobbyist birder, like probably many of you are. I'm an electrical engineer by degree. I have a bachelor's in electrical engineering from Rice University and a master's from Georgia Tech. And those kinds of ties will come into play when we start talking about audio processing and video processing. So some of that electrical engineering background kind of helped out with that. So this being Valentine's Day, I thought I'd start us with a heart. And I love Ivorybills. This is what I'm doing instead of going out somewhere on Valentine's Day, I guess. So here we are in 1935. This is Paul Kellogg, and this is for the younger crowd here. This is what an iPod looked like in 1935. Many hundreds of pounds of equipment. You can see Paul Kellogg jamming with his headphones on in the back of his wagon, which was drawn out there by mules. A probably little known fact, which I stumbled into in a very, very roundabout way, is that Ike Page was a black man that owned some mules, and they conscripted his mules into service, or he rented the mules, or I may have even gone out in the woods with them. I think he did. And a few years ago, I had an opportunity to meet his son, Fred Page, who would have been about 4 to 5 years old during this expedition. Unfortunately, the time we had that we were going to meet up with Fred, he was sick that day, and we had to pass on that. He lives in Natchez, Mississippi, or he did. And unfortunately, Fred Page died in 2016, and we never did get to meet him. That was rather sad, but it was interesting to find somebody that had a tie to the expedition. This is the Cornell expedition in 1935. Paul Kellogg and Arthur Allen were the faculty members there, and Jim Tanner went with them as a grad student at the time. They recorded the films you've seen of Ivorybills, and I'm going to show you some of that. They recorded the audio, the only audio recordings we have of Ivorybills. But one thing to note is the way they recorded. It's fascinating the way they recorded the sound. I think they recorded it onto video film, but they did not record video and sound simultaneously. They used a modulated glow lamp to change the brightness as the sound changed, and it's remarkably good sound for the technology they were using. They did have a parabolic dish and so forth. And so I show this one. I think it seems like Matt or someone showed this last week even. Some of the film that James Tanner got. You notice he's right up at the hole. He's in another tree at the same height as the cavity, and a little more on that later. But I put some audio to this one evening about 15 years ago to sync up the audio with the video, and take a look at that. And about halfway through this clip, listen at the nest exchange for the sound of wing beats, and that's going to come into play later too on the wing beat. So that was the nest exchange. That's the female that's coming to the nest. The male was leaving the nest. It's black and white, but you can tell by the shape and the darkness of the crest whether it's the male or the female. So a little bit more on this on the birds that we saw there. A voice from the past. It says, I had a phone conversation with Nancy Tanner in 2003. She was 85 at the time, and I had the fortune of recording that conversation. And she does mention, and I throw this name in here, Dick Pugh was founder of the Nature Conservancy. She and Jim Tanner were friends with him. He was an early figure in some of the Ivorybill stories you might read about.
David, I'm going to be obnoxious and intervene just because this is so important and this is such a loving thing for you to do. So many of the people are new to the Ivorybill story. So just to set the stage about how important this is, Jim Tanner, as David mentioned, David went over this, but I just want to clarify to make sure we're all on the same page. So the Cornell expedition of 1935 was led by the founder, essentially, of field ornithology, Arthur Allen, who founded the Cornell Lab of Ornithology in 1915. Along with him, as David mentioned, was his student, James Tanner, who later went on to be a long-time professor at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And so he had passed, I imagine, at the time David was doing this, but his wife, Nancy, was quite an accomplished person herself and was really knowledgeable about the Ivorybill and other things. So I'm sorry for interrupting. I won't do it again. I just want you to know how, as someone who's studied the Ivorybill for 50 years, this is really, really touching to me that you've been able to do this, David. I just want to say thank you so much. With that, I'll show you.
Sure. And, I told you I'd take 45 minutes to an hour to do this. I could go on for like 6 or 8 hours. And so I'm trying to skim the highlights. But they did start this expedition out from Ithaca, New York, with the goal of recording all of the sounds of all the birds of North America, because Arthur Allen knew that the passenger pigeon and the Carolina parakeet had gone extinct just in recent time in his lifetime, and no one had ever recorded their voices. And their goal bird, when they started on that sabbatical, when he started on his sabbatical in spring of 35, number one bird they were after was the Ivory-billed woodpecker, because it had been thought once to be extinct already and was obviously extremely rare. So that's why they went to the Singer Tract in northeast Louisiana, and that's why they got what they got in the way of film and sound. Okay, so I had a nice conversation, about 35 minutes with Miss Tanner that I recorded, and I went through it in the last few days and excerpted a few things. I had asked her about some scaling pictures, bark scaling. Ivorybills are known to scale bark. That was a lot of what Tanner talked about in his book. He had a picture or two in his book. And we were trying to do some real close-up forensic type analysis to distinguish maybe one type of bark scaling from another. And so I thought, well, if we could get the negatives or some really high quality photos, not the reproduced ones in the book, that would be a nice thing to have. So I asked her if she had access to those photos, and here's what she had to say about it.
Well, I will look. Can't tomorrow until late afternoon. It's gone all day.
Okay, I'm going to California tomorrow for the weekend, so.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I guess.
And I very much doubt if I have anything better, but I will look.
Okay, and you said Tensaw has all the negatives. Do you know do they just have them archived there?
Yes. Jim he went down there when they were dedicating a building in about 87, I can't remember, and went all through what's left, and they wanted to know what they should plant and how they could make it come back a little bit, and so forth and so on.
Guilt, about 50 years too late, huh?
Yeah. And at that time, he was talking to them and said, well, you might as well have the negatives there, which he did.
Okay.
So, but I'm sure we have everything that he took. He wouldn't have taken anything down there that was any good and not have kept a copy.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I'll do my best sometime this weekend, and will email you.
So that was, 19 years ago, and she said that the Tensaw National Wildlife Refuge, which is the current name for what was the Singer Tract in the 30s, has archived those photos. They have them somewhere. Hopefully they still have them and didn't pitch them out with the spring cleaning. So if anybody wants to or maybe has pursued those, that would be probably a good thing to do. In addition, I mentioned earlier, you saw the vocalizations and you saw the films that they got. Jim Tanner was a grad student, so he was the one that had to climb the tree and do the filming. And here's what Nancy said about the vocalizations they recorded.
You mentioned them double wrapping. All the recordings I have gotten from Cornell have a lot of pounding and calling.
Well, I tell you why. The bird was being mightily disturbed at that point.
Okay.
And when Jim was up there near them with equipment and stuff, you know, they were excited and angry, and they really pound, and call, you know, because they were very upset. That was not a normal way of acting.
Okay, so and for those of you who don't know, that cavity that we saw the Ivorybills on, where the filming was done, that nest failed. The guys there from Cornell cut the tree down, took the nest cavity with them, and to this day, I'll show you a picture a little ways on into this presentation of that cavity. I've actually seen that at Cornell, the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. They still have that. We actually use that to take some measurements, to measure bird sizes and all of the with using the film and the known sizes of the cavity and the tree diameter and so forth. Okay, a little more history here. I also had the pleasure of speaking with Virginia Eckelberry on March 28, 2002. She was 88 years old at the time. Don, her husband, Don Eckelberry, is the famous wildlife artist who was the sketcher of the Ivorybill that you see so often, that has been, I believe, falsely claimed as the last confirmed sighting of an Ivorybill in 1944. I have in my notes, I noticed in the last couple of days from my conversation with her, that Eckelberry's sightings were supposedly the most recent reliable ones, and they were in the 1950s. And I don't have any more information on that, but he apparently had seen Ivorybill somewhere else in the 50s. Either that or I just wrote it down wrong. But anyway, that's a side note. We'll stick with Virginia here for a minute. I unfortunately did not record that conversation, but I took notes and sent some emails out very shortly after the conversation, so I would have a record of some of the things that she said. Don had only died about a year earlier in 2001, and Virginia died in 2009. And another side note, while we're talking pronunciation and getting it straight for the historical record, Don and Virginia were very instrumental in starting the Alcerite Nature Center in Trinidad. I don't know how many of you are aware of that, but I had a college roommate and friend who lived down there for several years. And down there, they call it the Alcerite Nature Center, which is a fairly natural way to pronounce that. But Virginia made it clear to me on the phone that Alsa was Icelandic, and explained to me that it's pronounced Alsa, like the OU in out. So if you ever get a chance to go to Trinidad, it's supposed to be a very nice nature center there that's very bird focused. Okay, so let's move on to what happened in Arkansas in the early 2000s. On February 11th, 2004, Gene Sparling, who for the world looks like he's in a dugout canoe there, but he's not, was canoeing down Bayou de View in more like that kind of canoe. Of course, this picture was taken in the fall, it looks like, from the colors, and he was there in February when the leaves would have been off the tree, and had a sighting of what he described as a woodpecker, a black and white woodpecker with the black and white reversed, and he published his notes kind of cryptically in the Arkansas Canoe Club website. And that history is well written, and I'm gonna not go into a whole lot of detail on what Gene did, but he did, through a roundabout way of contacting a couple people, he ended up getting with Bobby Harrison and Tim Gallagher. Or actually, he got with Tim Gallagher, and Tim called Bobby, and they came. And 2 weeks to the day later, on February 25th, 2005. They both saw it together, and their field notes there, they sketched what they saw and so on. And about 2 weeks after that, no, it wasn't even 2 weeks, it was less than a week after that is when I got word of it, again through a roundabout way of, it's a small world of Ivorybill searchers, and word got to me, and the day after I heard about it, I was over in the area. I didn't have exact details yet, but turned out I went right to the right area, some fortune, and started looking there. About 2 weeks after that, maybe 3 weeks after that, we had already formed a group and started buying remote cameras that I was in charge of putting out. We would mount remote cameras on trees. Keep in mind, game cameras in 2004 were still a pretty new commodity, especially digital game cameras. There had been some film versions, and these were some of the very early digital game cameras that were motion detection. fact, at that time, they were motion detection only. It took us another year or two to find some, the Reconyx brand, that we could do time lapse with. But we would put these and aim them at trees that either had likely scaling, or in some cases where we saw what we considered cavities that would be large enough for an ivory-bill to roost or live in. And we would set up the cameras on those. The problem with the motion detect only is you have to be close enough. Your tree where your camera is has to be close enough to the tree of interest to where a bird can set off the motion detector. And birds are pretty well insulated, and these are thermal infrared motion detection. And so you got to get fairly close to make that happen. And you can see in this picture the yellow paddle that you're going to see numerous times throughout this presentation. And you also see the camera, which is on a tripod there. I'll show you the setup I was using at the time here in just a minute when I got the video. It was actually quite a bit like that. I have the camera sitting on a boat cushion, which was sitting on a milk crate, to put it just above the gunwale of the canoe. And it's pointed just about in the direction it was pointed, or maybe not even quite that far off to the side. I always tried to point it off to the side where most of the woods were. So if I ever did see an ivory-bill fly by or a likely candidate fly by, I could just grab the camera and point it. It was always recording. When I get to the end, these were digital tapes. When I get to the end of the 1 hour tape, I would rewind the tape, record back over it, and away we'd go. Oh yeah, and the trolling motor. I had a trolling motor on there, not just because I'm lazy, but because it's a lot easier and more stealthy to move through the water if you just got a little small electric motor running than if you're paddling, especially if you're flashing bright yellow paddles. After a while, I got some darker and camo colored paddles to solve part of that problem, but still, it keeps your hands more free. And I had trolling motors for some reason don't kick up like outboard motors do when you run into stumps, and the cypress knees are everywhere in the swamp. So I built a little mount there with a hinge on it so that if my trolling motor did hit something, it would kick up and not rip it off the back of the canoe. And I also epoxied a wooden wing on the back of it to keep the noise down as it would ripple off the back of the shaft down to the motor. So that helped a little bit with keeping things a little quieter. April 25th, 2004, my brother-in-law Robert and I were out. I had, I think, 8 cameras out at the time, and we had been out all since pre-dawn. Had gone several miles down south, and we're coming back up to where we had parked the car, and we were pulling in to check our 8th and final camera when all this happened. A couple things to note. Number one, you see the yellow paddle there. The handle of that yellow paddle is going to be kind of a pointer here in a minute for where you want to be looking. And also notice in the video that my plans to pick up the camera when I saw an ivory-bill were completely foiled because I had just picked up a paddle, and you'll see it flash by as well. So let me just let it run, and you can watch, and we'll do a few slow motions and zooms and such as that.
Yeah, that's because I put my other camera out here one time.
Just above the handle of the paddle.
See it?
And that was that. Here, I'll give you a second chance. You don't often get second chances, but watch it. Watch again.
See it?
So what happened after this for the next, I don't know how long, minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, something like that. We listened, we kept the camera running. The bird took off through the woods, and in fact, we were turning in the direction it flew off. You could actually see it for probably 7 or 8 seconds, just became a dot eventually. We waited, listening, thinking, well, we're going to hear a bird call, because very often when a pileated flies through the woods, it goes and lands somewhere and calls out. Nothing happened. We heard nothing. And so finally we figured it had been long enough. Curiosity was getting the better of us. So we stopped the camera, rewound it, played it back and looked. There's a little 2-inch monitor on these cameras, and you can't see much on there, but I could see enough to see that something flew off in the bottom corner of the video. I thought, good. We'll take it home, put it on the big TV, blow it up, just like they do on TV, and there it'll be in all its glory. Whatever the heck it was, we'll be able to see it. Well, it doesn't work that way either, because the more you take a small thing and blow it up into a big thing, the more blurry it becomes. But we had something to work with anyway. So I forwarded the tape on, and then we finished out the day checking cameras and leaving the area. So over the next few weeks, we did various, or a few weeks, months, which grew into several months. We did some analysis on the video. We shared it with other members of the team. Everything was still quiet at this point. This was April 25th, so it was only about 2 months after Tim and Bobby's sighting, a little over 2 months after Gene's sighting. We had already at this point had several sightings by some of the people that were out there searching, but everyone told us through their binoculars what they saw, and we kept saying, I, for one, kept saying, we don't need to hear what you saw through binoculars, pick up your camera instead. So we had this little clip of video, and we did some things to it. This version is a zoomed in, slowed down version. And when you do this long enough, you start seeing things in the trees. So you see the handle of the paddle there. Just to the left of that is the tree with the stick figure lady on it in the dress. You'll see what I mean as it starts rolling. Keep your eye there. See the little stick figure right there? And it does keep going and going. In fact, some people I've showed it to that were completely out of the loop as far as birders and whatnot go, but people who were looking at doing some work on the video said, hey, you did a good job of keeping that thing in the frame by panning the canoe around. I said, no, that was just pure luck. We just happened to be turning left, and the bird happened to be flying left. So that part of it was dumb luck. But after it becomes a dot, it becomes relatively useless for interpretation. After looking at this a couple hundred times, I thought, well, we had the camera running all day. We motored around through the woods. So I said, let me back it up a ways. Maybe, just maybe, while we were lollygagging along and quietly talking, maybe the bird flew through the background. Maybe it was back in there somewhere. And maybe we just weren't looking in the right place at the right time, because the bird there was obviously a bird there that flew away. It had to have gotten there at some point. So I backed it up. You see the little red arrow here. I'm going to play this and keep your eye on that black, white, black spot there. And this is way blown up and way slowed down, so it's very noisy, and it's also not focused. Okay, so that perched bird, as we call that, is going to have some significance when we do the analysis. It turns out, well, we'll go through that in a little bit when we go through the analysis. It goes out of the frame here. There's right by Robert's Key. There's a very, very large cypress tree. There's a bend in the channel, and we go around that cypress tree and turn in, and that's where we got the video. So this was like 25 seconds before the bird flew off the tree. In fact, when we got around this tree, we got to know these trees very well. We numbered and identified all these trees. We come around that cypress tree, there's nothing on that tree. Where that black, white, black spot is, there's absolutely nothing on it. In fact, in subsequent days and months, there was nothing on that tree that had a black, white, black signature. So anyway, we'll come back to that here in a little bit. So we're going to do a little primer on video here. There's some of the analysis we had to go through. In 2004, video, TV, and whatnot was what we call today standard definition. It was just TV for the first 70 years or so of television. In the Canon world, this was a Canon GL2 that I shot this video with. It was a very nice, they called it prosumer. It was a high-end consumer camera, but a lot of professionals used it as well. It was a pretty state-of-the-art kind of camera with a really nice lens on it. And it had two video modes, and I just had left everything in normal. And normal mode to Canon meant interlaced video. And I'll tell you about what interlaced video here is in a second. Frame mode is an alternate mode they have, which is progressive. And you may have heard of 1080i and 1080p in high def. The I is for interlaced and the P is for progressive. But standard definition is not 1080 lines of resolution. It's 480 lines of resolution, which is why when you see standard def television today on your high def television, you think, wow, I used to live with that. I have high def or 4K. Quality is just not what it is today, but it was the same, essentially the same standard of television, what we call NTSC, which stands for National Television Standards Committee in the U.S., which was the standard of television since television was invented up until well, it still is today. It's still just like that today if you're looking at standard definition. 480 lines of resolutions, that's horizontal lines across your television screen or your video screen, and 30 frames per second. Okay, so let's a little bit more on that. A frame is two fields, and the way interlacing is done is odd lines, 1 through 479, are displayed first, and then a 60th of a second later, the even lines are displayed. Your eye hangs on to those, and it looks like a smooth transition as you're going from one to the other. And so those odd and evens are 1/60th of a second apart. In frame mode or progressive mode, 480p, this would be called, all 480 lines are there every 1/30th of a second. And that's more like film. Standard movie films since the beginning of movies have been at 1/24th of a second or 24 frames per second. With frame mode, you get twice as much information, but you only get it half as often because you get it 1/30th of a second instead of 1/60th, getting half of it 1/60th of a second. So a little video here with an interlaced example to show you what you're dealing with interlacing. And this obviously is not birds, this is cows. But I found this explanation for how interlacing works. So looking at a cow and a calf here, in a zoomed in version of that, here's what you'd see on the first field if you broke this down into individual fields. You get the odd ones, every other field. And then if you have both fields at the same time and the cow moved, and you try to put them both together at the same time, you're going to get this jittery shifting look. If you're watching it move in time, you don't get that. You get a smooth movement. So when you look for if you try to take a still shot out of an interlaced video, the lines on that one field on the left would be interpolated, and they use it means anything to you. They use a cubic spline interpolation to fill in the blanks there. So that's a little bit about how video works. So when you slow things down, there's interpolating going on, and there's possibly video artifacts as well, because it depends on speed of movement and so on. But the nice thing about interlaced is if this had been shot in progressive mode, we would have half as many fields, but the same number of frames, but each frame would be the entire set of all 480 lines at one time. And I still to this day don't know which one would have been better, but we can't fix that now anyway. What would have been a lot better is if I hadn't been pointing the camera straight ahead at Robert 6 feet away, because it was focused at 6 feet and things out at 60 feet were quite blurry, which is that's probably the biggest part of this problem. If the camera had been angled angled where it wasn't pointed at Robert and been focused out at 60 feet, we would have much better quality video. So we were stuck with what we were stuck with. And so what we did on March 15th of 2005, we went out in the woods to do a reenactment. This is at the exact same place. This is the site of the video. From left to right, there's March-on Lammertink, the Dutch ornithologist who's woodpecker, a good friend of mine. Bobby Harrison, Tim Barksdale with the black and white stick. He's a professional videographer who was under contract with Cornell and the Nature Conservancy to video. He had a really nice video camera. His lens, I understand, was about $150,000 worth of lens. So he had a very professional setup in those days. Still standard def, but he had good quality optics with it. The guy holding the red, I apologize, I do not remember his name. He was one of the searchers that came on board for the winter of 2004 and 5 to help with the search. And then that's me. And then the lady in front of me is Utami Setirini. That's Marchan's wife. She's originally from Indonesia. And she's holding what looks like a director's slate. I made that up and put the little stripes on and everything, but it turned out to be handy because we did, like, I think it was 36 takes with different focuses, different f-stops, different things to capture all we could about these about the flapping and the colors and so on. You see around Marchan's neck, you see a decoy, a painted decoy. Bobby Harrison made that. And with Marchan's design work and Bobby's construction work, we built flapping models of both an Ivorybill, which has the green pole, and a pileated, which has the red pole. And I don't think I showed any video of this, but there's a bunch of stills we've got. The videos are kind of funny too in some ways because those guys are out there flapping. And of course they can't get to near the flap rate that the bird actually flaps at, but you get some motion blur out of it as well. So analyzing the video there, you can see Utami and I in the boat. We didn't bring Robert back out, but I focused, actually, instead of focusing on her, I just manually focused the camera at 6 feet. And we did all the different takes I had mentioned. We also took measurements of skins. We took measurements from the 1935 film frames, and you see marks and measurements on those cavities and on the width of the tree and the bird and so on, because we know those sizes very, very precisely because we were able to measure them off the log, which has died and not grown anymore since 1935. And then we took measurements actually projected onto a screen and took measurements off of the video that I took and did some comparative measurements. And of course we did the reenactment with the anatomically correctly colored models. Okay, so one of the things we measured was the wrist to tail tip differences. And I'm going through some points that we published in the science paper. John Fitzpatrick, I think, actually put these slides together. He did a lot of specimen measuring and also the film measuring, and we all did the video measuring together. You can see there's Marchan with that cavity at Cornell. We know those distances and got measurements off not just that one frame with that one bird, but the male and female were both on the tree at one time. So we got multiple measurements from the film. We took measurements from the trees on the film, on my video, and you can see the tree there. We went out and put tape on it, and we measured the diameters, diameter at different heights because it was different tapers. So we measured and got as precise as we could on that. There's still some slight measurement error possibilities there, but we did it as accurately as we were able to. And so the question is it possible to measure the size of the bird in the fuzzy Luneau video? Well, there again is the handle of the paddle and the stick figure lady on the tree, which I hope, let me see if you can see my cursor there. There's the feet and the dress and the neck and the head. You watch these things enough, you can see those sorts of things, I guess. So here, frame by frame, you can see the bird, the wing showing out from behind the tree, and then the tail flipping out before it takes off. And so we got some measurements off of that. There's some diagrams of the measurements we took. And as you see the diameters of the tree there, 28.4 and 32 centimeters, and comparing that to the bird size. And so with the measurements that Fitzpatrick and others took of skins in museums, we got some pileated, whichever, males and females. We got some Ivorybill males and females from skins, and you can see the various sizes there. And then from the filmed birds, Allen's male and female came out pretty much consistent with the skins. And then the measurement we had, measurements we took in the video, came out up with the high ends of the Ivorybill. Okay, result number 2 was the amount of white in the perched bird, and these are some sketches. I think John Fitzpatrick did the sketch as well, showing the bird as it takes off and flashing that white. and there's some pileated down below for comparison, and then the Ivorybill from the Allen videos, or Allen films from 1935. The trailing white edge, pileated, are the two on the top, from the top view and the bottom view, top view and bottom view of Ivorybill on the bottom there. And when you see a bird from the top, those are the two left birds. See a bird from the top, if you see a lot of white, it's an Ivorybill, but you still have a little bit of white in the bases of the primaries and secondaries of the pileated. Underneath, both of them flash a lot of white. So you have to be careful about where that white is when you see them from underneath. So here's some more frames of the bird taken off from the tree. And I'm going to just go single frame by single frame here through this. And you see the flashing white. There's a lot of discussion about upper versus lower parts of the wings, and we'll deal with that as well. So you got several flaps there, and you can also see, let me just back up and talk about the way the bird flies. The wings don't, the wings go out to 3 o'clock, and then the bird starts pulling them in. They don't really touch at the bottom. They don't come together at 6 o'clock. And then here are some stills from the reenactment. This is the trailing edge white thing. If you look at the top three and you look at the bottom three, and of course this is strictly stiff as a board, literally wings, so you don't have the wing flexing. But we tilted them back, we tilted them forward, we did all manner of tilting to compare. And no matter what you did with the pileated, you always saw the black trailing edge. And of course, these videos are purposely blurred because we focused at 6 feet. But if you look at the three on the top, you see there's always a black edge. Best case scenario is that one on the left where you see a lot of white, but you can still see a black trailing edge. And on the Ivorybill, you see all white. And the models actually have a black stripe down the middle, just like they're supposed to. The white bleeds over into black, and that stick that Tim Barksdale was holding earlier, he painted up on purpose to see how much bleeding there is of the white over the black. But in the videos, the white overcomes the black, and especially with motion. But I even took some stills of white in a distance with some black and white boards I had painted, and found that to be true. The white overcomes, which is why you don't see the thin black stripe down the middle of the wings. Even in these slow moving models, you don't see that. And then here's a couple comparative drawings to frames from the, let's see. Though the top one is from my video and the bottom one is from a pileated video we got somewhere along the way, but you can still see a thin black trailing edge. Yes, it looks like there's a lot more white on that bottom pileated than there should be. And again, that's because of the bleeding of the white. All right, the other one, and this is one I did not notice. I will admit that I did not notice at first glance, but when you look at it, I think John Fitzpatrick is the one who called this to our attention. And by the way, there were 5 of us that worked on the analysis for the science paper. John Fitzpatrick, Marchon Lammertink, Tim Gallagher, Ken Rosenberg, and myself. And we had quite a few, way more than 5 items that we thought were indicative of this bird being an Ivorybill, but we only put the 5 in there that we all 5 agreed on. There 3 or 4 of us would have strong feelings about one, but 1 or 2 would have some doubts. So we didn't put anything in there about that had doubts with it. We put all the ones that we were all in unanimous agreement on. And this one, I didn't recognize at first, but once he points it out, once you see the film, I think you'll be able to see it fairly well. Look at the back of the pileated, solid black through the middle of the body. And the Ivorybill has 2 stripes running up the back. Now, keep your eye on the bird in the video right there. And I'm gonna walk through the frame by frame here. And look at the center part. The white on the wings is moving, but watch for a center part of white. You can see it pretty well right there. It does not move. Oops. It does not. I'm going to back up some now. There's white in the center that does not move with the wings. Forward and backward. And there's no reason in the world that a pileated woodpecker should have white there on its body. You shouldn't be able to see any white there in the center of its back. Any white you might see on a pileated would be in the wings, and it would be flapping with the wings. Okay, and then we shot for the last probably 6 months, well, all winter long, as we found pileateds in flight. We all tried to video it to collect as much pileated flight patterns as we could. And there's a good example on the bottom of what a pileated looks like, blurry, flying away. But you can see clearly see the black trailing edge. Whereas in the upper one, the Ivorybill, or the one in my video, you can't see any black trailing edge on that. All right, and then we get back to the one we were talking about earlier, the perched bird, the black and white perched bird, or black, white, black perched bird. The top two, A and B, are stills, shots taken from the video. And you see this black, white, black bird. The bottom two were on reenactment day, and you can see what we would have seen in D there had the camera not been pointing at Robert and had it been pointing out to the woods and focused out, at infinity or a longer distance, would have been clear as a bell. But in C, you see what we did on the reenactment when we focused it at 6 feet, and you see how blurry it got. But you see that black, white, black pattern, which matches almost perfectly what you see in A and B. And the other thing that is very helpful with this perched bird, or what we're calling a perched bird, is, again, I told you as we came around, there was nothing on that tree that looked like that. In subsequent days and weeks and months, as we went by there, the tree was just a tree again. It didn't have a black, white, black pattern on it. So whatever that black, white, black pattern was, by the time we came around the tree, it was gone. It had disappeared. And the tree that the bird flew from was about, I think it was about 3 meters away, 2 to 3 meters, I think. I don't remember the number. Apologize for not having that number off the top of my head. It was very close, and it was lower. So this bird could have easily moved down to where it launched from in the video. In fact, if this is truly a bird, it's something, it went somewhere. And so I think the most plausible explanation is that was a bird on the tree, and that bird moved down and then trying to hide from us. And when we turned to come up toward its tree, it looked around. You can see its head look around right before it flew. It saw us and got spooked. If we'd gone on up the channel, I'm convinced the bird would not have flown. It would have just stayed hidden behind the tree till we were out of sight. But it saw us approaching it, and it took off. Okay, so in summary, these are the 5 things that we put in the science paper. These are the 5 things we thought were the best indicators that the bird in the video was an ivorybill. The size, the presence of the large white triangle on the lower wings, the white trailing edges in the upper and underwing, upper and lower, ventral and dorsal, or dorsal and ventral, if you will. Presence of white on the back of the bird, and then the distant perched bird and its size and pattern and how it corresponds just perfectly to an ivorybill model that we hung up there. So those were our 5 main points of interest on that we put in the science paper. Okay, so after, you might ask, why didn't we get this video enhanced? Why didn't we try to make something better out of it? Well, as luck and fate would have it, I got an email January 2nd, 2007 from Rick Lyon of the Goddard Space Flight Center of NASA. Dear Professor David Luneau, a few emails been circulating around. It says, I have significant experience in image deconvolution via the maximum entropy method and have used my approach successfully on the Hubble Space Telescope. You remember the Hubble Space Telescope was put up and it had a extremely, extremely minor error in the grinding of the lens, but it made things blurry. And NASA was aghast and embarrassed and so on. And they eventually set it up with a big contact lens essentially to correct the vision. But in the meanwhile, they did math tricks and optical tricks to refocus the lens. And they did that successfully on the Hubble Space Telescope. And this guy is one of the guys who did it. And he says also the NOAA weather satellites, plus some military and other applications such as aircraft. This approach is based upon incorporation of prior information such as focus, noise statistic detection, and camera effects. I've not used the approach on video data, but only on single or sets of images. And they said they should be able to convert the video to a series of images. We had already done that. And they could be passed through the maximum entropy algorithm and subsequently reconstructed into video at higher resolution. If you were interested, I may be able to help. Well, needless to say, I was interested. We were all interested. And so Rick worked on this quite a bit. I don't know how many hours he put into it. We stayed in email contact. The bottom line was, and this is maybe a little counterintuitive, is this was a way, way harder problem than fixing the Hubble's problem. Now, there's a lot of money on the line with the Hubble because it was a $1 billion telescope or whatever, and it was embarrassing that it didn't work perfectly. So they got that fixed up. Over the course of a year, he worked on it. Here are a few enhanced frames that he did. This is just a GIF that keeps moving over and over again. There's color flashing and so forth. And he says, don't worry about the color flash. This is something I'll correct. And it is caused by the deconvolution, not preserving the image range. I needed to rescale each color before combining them, but haven't perfected this yet. You're going to see in the final email I got from him, if you understand it all, then you are officially promoted to video expert, because he's every conversation I had with him, I felt like I didn't know anything about video or anything about optics. He does this every day for a living, apparently. Last email I got from him on February 6, 2008, so a little over a year later, said, I tried some more deconvolution over the holidays with lab point spread functions, but still haven't gotten much better results. The problem is really, and I talked to him on the phone too, the problem is there's two different primary motions going on. Images are shifting around due to canoe, roll, and drift. Now, all of us just watched the video, and probably the last thing on our mind was, hey, your canoe is rolling and drifting. I mean, it doesn't bother our eyes, but it bothers calculations, apparently. And the bird is flapping his wings. Hey, it's a bird. What do birds do, right? They flap their wings. He was dealing, and he explained to me on the phone once that he's got a whole sky of references of points. He's got star points out there, and he knows that they're supposed to be little points. So he can base a lot of his math on these points. He goes on to say, in order to perform a more meaningful deconvolution, I attempted to cross-correlate the frames to deduce the X and Y image, shift and roll, then try Fourier interpolation technique, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Talks about the motion blurring on individual frames from the moving wings. I've tried interleaving blank frames in between each of the real frames onto a finer grid and in all three variables. But the problem here is the sampling rate of the camera is less than the Nyquist frequency, and thus aliasing occurs, which corrupts the deconvolution. I've tried preferentially weighting certain frames, but it's still a difficult problem. Just reading his sentence is a difficult problem for most of us. But the problem wasn't difficult because it was a multi-dimensional problem with the things that were fixed in time and space were trees, but they're not nearly as convenient as little points like stars. So the bottom line is we didn't get any miraculous TV quality, how on the shows, it always cracks me up when I watch these shows where they say, enhance that, and they click one button and all of a sudden the blurry thing is clear as a bell and you can read the license plate at 2 miles away. Real life, it doesn't happen like that. Because we were dealing with apparently some of the best people at doing this sort of thing, and they couldn't do it either. So that was a bit disappointing, but we gave it a shot. Okay, so one more piece of evidence from the video, and we did not include this with the science paper, but it was only because we weren't confident that we had exhausted the world of pileated woodpeckers and how fast they can flap. So we continued even after the announcement in the science paper was published to look at the wing flap rate. And in short, the bird in the video flaps at about the same rate as the filmed Ivory-billed, and you heard that the sound as the bird came out of the cavity, that was really recorded in 1935, and it obviously was wing beats from an Ivory-bill because James Tanner was in the tree right there beside the nest. And it was much faster than any known pileated. That's not to say there's not someone out there that can do this. I'm going to show you this table here. It's a lot of numbers, but we're going to focus on just a few of the numbers eventually. There's wing beat numbers 1 through 10, And the numbers in the matrix are rates. Those are flaps per second, or hertz if you want to call it that, but flaps per second based on each wing beat. The top two are the one in my video, and in the 1935 Allen. We only had eight sounds from Allen's, and up through number 8, it hangs on to a rate of 7.4. Starts out just a little faster and slows down as the bird gets going. A guy named David Nolan did a lot of pileated viewing and put his data out there for people to use, and it was actually used in one of the doubters' papers as evidence that the bird in my video was a pileated woodpecker. But if you look at wing flaps 1, 2, 3, 4 along in there, the rates are they start out at the same for like 2 or 3 flaps. But I want you to focus all the way out at like beat number 7, 8, 9, and 10. And you can see the top 2 are still at a sustained rate in the 8 and 7 range. And by that time, which is less than 1 second, because you're talking about wing beat rates of 5, 6, 7 per second. So after about 7 flaps, that's only a second has passed. And the pileated has already, the four known pileateds have all gone into their slow, deep flapping wing beats, undulating flight, the kind we've seen with most woodpeckers and certainly with pileated woodpeckers. So just keep an eye on, or just kind of commit to memory 8, 9, and 10 being in the 3 and 4 range for pileateds, and 7 and 8 for ivory-bills or the bird in my video. We're going to come back to that in a few more slides when we talk about yet another kind of woodpecker. That is the imperial woodpecker, the largest woodpecker ever thought to have lived on planet Earth. Why the imperial woodpecker? Well, because of its flight characteristics, its launch sequence, and its flap rate. It's 700 grams versus 510 for an ivory-bill, and I apologize that I didn't put the number for the pileated up there, but it's substantially less than 510. Maybe more like 300, I think. But don't quote me on that number without checking it. In 1956, a dentist from Pennsylvania named William Ryan went, I think 3 different times into the Sierra Madres in Mexico on expeditions and filmed lots of wildlife there, he has the only filmed imperial woodpeckers ever. No voice recordings, these were silent films. And Marchon Lammertink and Tim Gallagher, kind of with a little bit of resourcefulness and a little bit of investigation, came to be aware of that these films were available. William Ryan had not published them. He was kind of a meticulous photographer, and he had tripods with him, and he would set up and make fabulous films. But when he saw the imperial woodpecker, he was on the back of a mule. Mules seem to keep coming around in this story. And his films of the imperial woodpecker were kind of shaky, and he was not really particularly proud of them, so he just kind of put them away. But it turns out he was sitting on the only known films of imperial woodpeckers ever taken. Those are archived at Cornell now, and I'm going to show you. I clipped out just 3 flight launch sequences because he actually captured them taking off a tree or flying 3 different times. So you get to see what an imperial woodpecker. Keep in mind, this is a huge woodpecker, almost certainly extinct now. And here's what it looks like in flight. It's at the top of that tree. Look at the shallow wing beats and how fast they are. So here's a bird that by all rights, or certainly if you could subscribe to the theory that bigger birds flap slower, which was one of the things some of the doubters said was a maxim, which it turns out to not be the case. Couple of points here. First, before we get to the flap rate, the launch sequence agreed with what we wrote in our science paper about how the ivory-bill launched from the tree. Sibley had a totally different description of how it pushed off and so forth. It's getting down into the weeds on the flight sequence there, or the takeoff sequence, but it agreed perfectly with what we described. in our paper. And also, the flap rate of this enormous woodpecker is still faster than any known pileated woodpecker, despite having a 2.4 times larger body mass. So the flap rate is about the style of the bird's flapping, not about the size of the bird. If they both did the same flight patterns, yeah, size would come into play. But the pileated flaps has deep flaps where the wings come together at the bottom, what we call 6 o'clock on a clock, whereas the Ivory-bill and the Imperial both flap shallow and then pull their wings in and go back out for another stroke. The Imperial Woodpecker through flap 14 maintains 7.3 hertz or 7.3 flaps per second. I was telling you earlier, flaps 8, 9, and 10, all the pileators were down to like 3 and 4 by then, and the Ivory-bills had hung on into the 7 range at flap 8, 9, and 10. Here we have more flaps on the Imperial on those films, and it maintained a much higher flap rate than the pileated would. Okay, so we'll get to the part about the doubters. We after the paper was out, we fairly quickly had some doubters named Rick Prum, Jerry Jackson, Brett Benz, and Mark Robbins, who wrote a paper in June of 2005 for PLOS Biology, which was a fairly new at the time online journal. And this is only about 2 months after the announcement. But they withdrew that paper after apparently Cornell sent them some audio recordings that we had made, and that convinced them that, oh yeah, it must be there, and they just withdrew all their complaints about what they thought we had done wrong. But they got a lot of press from it. It was published. Press is always out after, if there's an A side, there's got to be a B side. So they sought them out and gave them a lot of press, even though they hadn't published their paper. Round 2 of the doubters came from Jerry Jackson, published in the Auk in January 2006, so 8 or so months later. And it was, I was reading through it again the other day, and it was like 25 pages long. It was extremely long, so I just excerpted a few things out of there that caught my eye and that I remembered. One was a whole section, why should Ivory-billed woodpeckers not be in eastern Arkansas? And in fairness, there was another section, why should they be in eastern Arkansas? So he's covering both sides there. But he was especially famous at that time for coining the phrase faith-based ornithology and doing a disservice to science. Those were two of the rather snide remarks he made about the work we had done in finding and documenting this bird. We wrote a rebuttal. When the Auk was going to publish his, they gave us the opportunity to write a rebuttal, kind of the point-counterpoint type thing in the same issue. And just note that Jerry was not part of the search, and nor was he part of the announcement. We did contact him before the announcement was made to let him know it was going to be announced, but he was not part of the search team. Round 3 was Sibley, Bevier, Patton, and Elphick. They wrote a comment which was published in Science on 17th of March 2006, so just almost a year after the initial publication of the paper. And of course, Science invited us to write a rebuttal for the same issue, so we had another point-counterpoint going there as well. Part of their explanation, and the part that stuck in my mind at the time and still does, is that when they described the flight of this bird, they said, well, the reason we were seeing so much white is you're almost always seeing the underside of the wings. And if you think about that from just a simple physics point of view, if you're looking at the back of a bird and you're always seeing the underside of a wing, he's not going to get any lift. He's just going to nosedive straight into the ground. You've got to be at some point seeing the top of the wings. And therefore, when you see the top of the wings, you should see an awful lot of black at some point if it's a pileated woodpecker. And you don't. There's not a single frame there where you see a significant amount of black. And also note, and this has been noted, it was noted well in Chris Haney's Woody's Laughs Laugh book, that Sibley, as well as other field guide authors, had declared the Ivory-bill extinct and left it out of their field guides, which I know earlier on Matt was asking our youngster on the Zoom call that what field guide he was using, because the problem with field guides is if you take these birds out, how's anyone going to know what they are that haven't haven't been looking at these in older field guides all their lives and learning about these birds, they need to hang on quite a bit longer in field guides. Round 4 of the doubters was, and I don't know what brought this guy in, other than the need to publish a paper, maybe I'm being cynical. But Martin Collinson from Scotland chimed in. He wrote an analysis of the Pie-Will versus Ibwell wing beat rates, and that's where I mentioned the Nolan videos. We wrote a rebuttal for that same issue of, I think it was BMC, the British, should have looked that one up, don't remember the name of it, but it was some British publication. And he just basically made a lot of math errors in his calculations, because the data he had from those, if you look, you saw the data for the Nolan videos, you could see how in the first 3 or 4, like the first half second, it flapped quickly and immediately went into its typical pileated slower flight. And then round 5 of the doubters is the one I think probably everyone on this call is familiar with. First of all, we stopped responding to critiques. It just, it was consuming our lives at that point. Everybody had something to say. And, we'd spoken our piece. We had responded to all the criticism that had come up to, for the first year and a half, 2 years or so. And so we stopped until recently when our friends at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service decided for some reason that it should be declared extinct, even though in 2010 they put out a species recovery report or recovery plan that said that they believed the evidence from Arkansas and that it was there. We did not, the original authors of the paper, we did not get back together and write as a group, but quite a few of the original authors wrote public comments. I know Tim and Bobby and John Fitzpatrick and I all did, and I probably missed 1 or 2 or 3 others in there that may have done it as well. Okay, so with one last piece of history, we had some talk earlier about J.J. Kuhn. That might have been before we actually started the recording of the call. But I had the fortune of meeting Edith Kuhn Whitehead in September of 2014. That's J.J. Kuhn's daughter. She was writing a book about her father. And there's a long, really interesting story that I'm not going to go into about how the roundabout way I came to know her. But she told us she was writing a book about her father. She was naming names, and she was going to tell who were the good guys and who were the bad guys. We went to visit her in Marshall, Texas, and I recorded about 2.5 hours of our conversation. And I will confess, I did not go back and listen to it in the last couple of days. I listened to a few minutes here and there just because, frankly, I had forgotten I had that much conversation with her. Unfortunately, about 6 months after we were there, she died in 2015 at 93 years old. I don't know about her manuscript. I don't know what happened to it. She was adamant that she was going to publish a book. And she had already written a lot of it. I didn't see it. Don't know how many pages she'd written, how many she managed to write before she died. But she did live in Marshall, Texas with her daughter and son-in-law. And if any of you Ivory-bill aficionados want something to chase down, you can contact me offline, and I'll see if I can get you in contact with the right people, and maybe we can find out about that book. But a little piece of trivia there is that J.J. Kuhn's real love, according to his daughter, was growing pecans. He loved pecans. He loved pecan trees. He got the job as the game warden there during the Depression because that was the only job that was available that he could find at the time, which is why he ended up in the Singer Tract. He's actually in the Louisiana Pecan Growers Hall of Fame, she told me. Didn't know there was such a thing, but that's his other claim to fame, I suppose. All right, so I'm gonna. Oh, here's Edith Kuhn Whitehead. There's a picture of her, and notice she had an Ivory-bill hanging in her house. So I got her to stand there in front of her Ivory-bill painting. And we're going to let our friend Nancy Tanner have the final word here. This I thought was a really interesting part of our conversation. It was near the end of my conversation with her.
Well, now I want you to do something for me.
Okay.
When you find the Ivory-bill, let me know.
So, and I did. The day, I'd have to go back and check my notes. The day of the announcement, might have been before we made the announcement, I called her and told her about it. So I wanted her to hear it directly rather than just seeing it on the news, because I thought that would be a little rude to spring it on her when she had been helpful and interested and had specifically asked me to let her know when we found it. So I did call her and let her know about that. Okay. Save a place for the Ivorybill. That's not just a picture of some big old cypress trees and a guy out there. That guy is Pratt Rimmel, who was from a fairly well-known Arkansas family, and he was in the 1970s was very instrumental in spearheading the effort to save the Cache River from being channeled by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They channeled a few miles of it, got an injunction, stopped it. Senator Dale Bumpers and Pratt Rimmel and others ganged up together to get that stopped, and that basically saved the big woods from being a big channelized ditch running through it, and left it the meandering swampy area that it still is today. Okay, I will stop and I will unshare my screen and try to answer any questions anybody has.
Wow, David, that was fantastic. I just Paul Jasek made an interesting observation that from his perspective, the Ivorybill seemed to be having its head a bit down, and maybe you could make an identification by the posture of the head in flight, like a common loon and a red-throated loon. You ever heard anybody say that?
I have not. The trouble with the bird flying directly away from you, it's really hard to see what the head is or is doing. And we never, at least I never saw any pixels of red on there, so I'm not sure we were seeing the crest unless it was a female. But those who did ever see the crest thought they were seeing red. So I think our lone bird there was a male.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's so confounding about the 1944 was the last confirmed sighting. That was Don Eckelberry's painting of what he allegedly saw, just as Tim Gallagher and Bobby Harrison and Matt Cortman drew what they allegedly saw. It's with so much as it's just narrative. There's no logic to it, and it's really become confounding and irritating. But anyhow, that's and I'll just tell you. So the reason I put up that Arkansas Bird Records Committee is someone on Facebook lectured me. I posted the announcement of this discussion on critically endangered birds. And this guy I think he's a Brit. This is always fun. We're not against Brits. It's just people who've never searched in the southern bottomlands for anything. Said, oh, that adds nothing. It would be rejected by a bird records committee. And I was asked to comment on it. And I said, okay, well, the only two relevant bodies that reviewed it, both the United States Fish and Wildlife Service and the Arkansas Bird Records Committee, both accepted it. So, and then they don't respond. It's like, and I'll open up the floor. But another thing that Fitz told me, it's fun to name drop, John Fitzpatrick, the Cornell Lab of Ornithology director. When I met with him in 2018, he said the thing that compelled him was the white, which is your perched bird. And right. I've never seen a good rebuttal to. I've never seen a rebuttal to that. Not to mention it's good. What do they say about that?
Well, I looked back through some of the rebuttals, and I think it was the Sibley one that said, "Oh, there were other. It's a video anomaly. There were others like that in the film. There was some other, white spots or something to that effect." But the real problem with that makes it so compelling is, first of all, we found exactly where that was, hung the model there, and it looks identical. Okay, so there's strike one to that rebuttal. Strike two is that videoing that same tree days and months and weeks later, there was never the black-white-black pattern there. And then on that same tree, when we came around, there was nothing on that tree, which means that whatever was there had flown. Well, even if it wasn't still on there, even if we didn't look at that tree when we were there or see it in the video, the fact that it wasn't there later means that it had been there and it moved somewhere. And we only ever saw one bird fly out of there. So it means that the bird we saw fly out of there was almost certainly the bird that was perched there that had the black-white-black pattern. And so to me, those are kind of additive probabilities that makes it that bird is the one that flew off, and that bird certainly no one would argue if that's a bird that it would be a pileated woodpecker.
One of the noteworthy things is it was, it was a full year after your video that Department of Interior announced the rediscovery of the Ivorybill, citing your video as the primary evidence. Within that year, did anybody in Fish and Wildlife Service say that's not an Ivorybill?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, the Fish and Wildlife Service, we worked for the next few years, and in 2010 the species recovery plan was finally published, which is an official document of Fish and Wildlife Service, even though a lot of non-Fish and Wildlife people work on the writing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's their official position. So, I mean, I guess there were probably individuals, there's individuals in every organization that don't agree with the rest of the organization. So there probably were some in there that didn't believe it, but it's not what came out officially when it was over.
My frustration as an American is the lack of transparency in all this. If they are now rejecting what they had accepted in 2005, I would like to see some explanation. We went back and our experts analyzed the Luneau, but we don't see that yet. They just removed their news announcement. That's really just dirty pool. That's not very scientific, or that's bad use of our taxpayer money.
Speaking of, you were talking about earlier about the broken link you showed. That link I sent a couple weeks ago in the chat window, it is apparently now they have posted the recording. They hadn't at the time. They said they were going to post it there, but they have finally posted.
Oh yeah,
the public hearing recording.
Yeah. I mean, again, I don't want to toot. Well, I will toot our own horn. Thanks to all of y'all just for showing up, and I'm thrilled that everybody's here. The people who work for us, the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, they could do this, or my nemesis, the Louisiana Ornithological Society, they could do this with my 50 years of dues. But it's really troubling that no one really wants to seem to get to the bottom of this. I'm always looking. I love skepticism. I was a skeptic, and even after having recorded the Ivorybills and audio recorded until I saw them in 2019, I was skeptical too. So we love skepticism, and again, maybe they know something we don't. But when you get about 3 questions in, and you're just a cad for asking questions, so it's so unscientific. But I think this is our chance to strike a blow for truth, just because we've gotten the record out there so clearly. But I don't want to make that too negative. I can't, David, I'm humbled by everything you've done. I mean, you've really done a great service, and that you were so generous with this. We really appreciate that.
Hey,
go ahead.
Can I say one more thing?
You can say 8 more things.
I had my screen share and couldn't see anything about who got on later. I was flipping through the list, and I see Bobby got on. Hi, Bobby. I see Melanie Driscoll's on. Yeah. Long time no see. Hello. She was one I mentioned last time we talked when I did my public comment, that there were those who were skeptical until they saw it. And
hello, David.
I do believe she fits that category. Hey, Bobby.
You did a great job.
Nice models you made there. Unfortunately, it didn't show any of the video with you flapping them. That's some good comic relief.
You did a great job with this presentation.
Thank you.
Hey, David, and hey, Bobby. Long time no chat.
Hi, Melanie.
Hey, hang on. Let me. Sorry, this started when I was needing to do things like eat for the first time today. So anyway, running around right now. But good to see you guys.
Good to see you too. You're not still being dogged about having claimed to have seen an Ivory-billed woodpecker, are you?
I mean, not actively. That's a different story, but no, not actively.
Okay, good.
I hate to interrupt, just for those of you playing at home. I just, someone who's done this for so long, I'm just so thrilled with the personages we have here. So Melanie Driscoll was one of the ones who observed the Ivory-bill, and of course, maybe not everybody. This is the nice thing, is we're bringing people to for the first time that they're looking at the Ivory-bill. And so Bobby Harrison and Tim Gallagher famously, and of course David went over this, but I just want to emphasize how appreciative we are of having Bobby here. That Bobby Harrison and Tim Gallagher followed up on the reports from Gene Sparling, the reports of Gene Sparling. I think Mary Scott, was it Mary Scott that ultimately got Cornell's attention? And so, I mean, just so many people acted in this, loving manner to get this before the American public, and we're just so thrilled to have y'all in doing that. I did want to just point out, we were talking about bird guides. I was so enamored of Eckelberry and Poe and/or Pugh. Again, I've heard it both ways, David, that I looked. This was a field guide written by Richard Poe and/or Pugh, and it's illustrated lovingly by Eckelberry. So this is nice when these things come together. David, here's sort of a technical. Actually, Melanie or Bobby, if y'all wanted to comment on what's going on with, post the Arkansas sightings, what's going on today, or not. I don't want to draw y'all out. Melanie, do you still have discussion? And I guess David asked you if you got people ask you about the. Did people ask you about the sighting anymore? Or?
It happens. It certainly happened more after I came down to Louisiana for a while. That was, of course, closer to the time frame when the sightings happened and the publication. And things obviously with the Ivory-billed, they go in cycles. So when things heat up around it, certainly I get more questions. I would assume if we weren't in a pandemic where I never saw or talked to anybody, I would get more sightings. There's, things do certainly go in cycles. Now the people I'm around most either have had the opportunity to ask or don't. Everybody has their own lens into things. And I would say with this story, everyone has their own grievances. I certainly hear a lot of grievances on a lot of discussions. One of my particular lenses into this is that there were several searches from Cornell. I wasn't allowed to tell my boss I was going, and when I came back, I could neither confirm nor deny that I had been there. The secretive nature of it was very secretive. And there was also quite a process of who got recognition and who got authorship. And I was one of, on the searches in terms of people who had sightings, one of the few ornithologists who had a sighting. There was another female who was actually a woodpecker biologist by training who had a sighting. Neither of us were authors. Neither of us were ever invited into any part of a process. And neither of us were invited to the DC press conference. And so for me to be asked, are you asked about this? Or to be told by somebody who was super integral to the writing of the papers, but never saw a bird, how did you fly under the radar and not catch a bunch of crap about this? That is its own story. So I'm not asked about it as much because my sighting was considered to be one of the better sightings in terms of numbers of field marks, but it was not even in the body of the paper. It was in the appendix. So everybody has their piece in this, and everybody has their let in or left out parts. And that includes, in David's series of doubters slides, there are, in any scientific endeavor, there are personalities and there are slights and there are inclusions and there are expertises that go less noticed. And, everybody's got their role, and sometimes it's not the role that they loved. We all are humans in it. And I must say, I very much appreciate David. One, it's really nice to see you. It's been freaking forever. And there's been a lot of water under a lot of bridges and a lot of oil on a lot of coasts. So I've been super busy with other things completely unrelated. But I really appreciate, David, that your presentation tonight was, I missed the first few minutes, but very kind of back to the evidence and the science and the, just kind of grounded in some really healthy realities. I really appreciate that. Science rarely comes with no doubt. And, that it's amazing to see the videos again. It's really super fun, and they're blurry videos without everything everyone would want. and still fabulous. And I appreciate that you are one who doesn't, you don't need to go for more than is there. So I appreciate that about you.
Thank you, Melanie. I do, I wanted to add something to that. They asked me to talk about the video tonight, not about all the other evidence. I took some side trips to some other things. But I think about what Joe Neal said, and I don't know, a few of you on here may know Joe Neal. He and Doug James wrote The Birds of Arkansas. Doug James died a few years ago. He was kind of the grandfather, I guess, of Arkansas birding. But Joe Neal's kind of taken up the mantle and run with it there. And Joe has always said that for him, what convinced him about the Ivory-billed woodpecker being here was how many people had seen it. He said that's what everything that we do in birding is based on what people see. And we actually, I just was reading through some of the literature today, and we had 7 sightings, and maybe it was 7 at the time of the announcement, but somewhere along the way we had 17 sightings by 15 people. And of course they're of varying quality and so on. But for Joe Neal, who's a very well-respected birder in Arkansas, that was it for him. Was forget the video, forget sound recordings. That many people said they saw it. He would have a hard time calling that many people liars, I think, or mistaken cases of mistaken identity.
If it's all right, I'll say something else, and I think this is really incredibly important. As a scientist and someone who had a sighting, I can't hit rewind on the binoculars. I can't hand them to somebody and hit rewind and have them see what I saw. Nobody can confirm that sighting. And I've been a birder for a long time now. I have seen things in the field and said something and then rewound in my head and, no, that wasn't X, it was Y. Like I can correct myself after a sighting for some things. Every single thing that is related to this bird, there is doubt in. Sightings cause some people more certainty and some people more doubt. Audio recordings cause some people to think there is more certainty and others to feel there is more doubt. Same with videos, same with, if there are blurry photos. I think it is incredibly important for a community of people who want to maintain a dialogue with a federal agency to recognize that doubt makes sense and is real. I think being too adamant about your own belief system and your own evidence is one of the most harmful things that can happen in a science process. And I think, there's certainly the being certain, when there was a doubter publication written, then there was a response that reasserted the evidence and reformulated, why there's a belief that this really happened and that the evidence is real. I'm not saying you just flip yourself on your head and you suddenly doubt everything you think you know, but I am saying that it's really important to recognize that the doubt makes a lot of sense. There are some really hard questions to answer if you want to assert that ivory-bills remain in existence today, enough to have a breeding population that is self-sustaining. And what bothers me most in anything, and it's what I helped caution Frank Wiley's search group with, is too much certainty. You should be your own worst critic, and you should always be your own worst critic. And I will say that until the ends of the earth. And I fully believe I had a sighting of an ivory-billed woodpecker, and I fully 100% accept that I met someone here when I first got here, and I was introduced right away as, this is Melanie Driscoll. She saw an ivory-billed woodpecker, and the person turned their back and stormed away from me, has never spoken to me again, which to me doesn't really bother me. I mean, I'm sorry that I don't get to know this person who's probably pretty lovely and has lots of good friends in the birding community, but her doubt is totally okay with me. It's totally allowable. I have no issue with it. I think that is a really, really important thing that I don't always hear as all these debates have gotten so divided. And in fact, one of the things that was one of the greatest roles I think I played in this when David White, was it David White who did the Nat Geo article, David and Bobby? David, whose last name might be White, but I would have
Mel White.
Mel White. Yeah, thank you. When Mel White came to interview me about the Ivory-billed after I'd moved down here, somebody told him he had to talk to me, but they didn't tell him why. And we got through a very long interview. And as I was telling my story at the very end of it, his face changed really dramatically when I started to describe my sighting. And when we got up to leave what was almost a 2-hour interview, he kind of framed that article as the believers and the skeptics, as these two completely divided camps with no room for doubt between, within either camp. And at the end of it, he said, I came into this convinced that you were a skeptic and that I was going to hear a story about how you'd been on the search and you'd seen nothing and everybody there was crazy. And he said, it wasn't until you actually described what you described flying in front of your eyes that I had any idea that you had a sighting. He said, you so much don't really care what I think that you're the first person that is making me really wonder if this could all be true.
Oh, Melanie, thanks for sharing that. That's a great perspective. And I have to plug you. You said lots of birds have been oiled. What are you working on now?
Right now, I'm not doing anything with oiled birds. I was super, super, super busy during and after the Deepwater Horizon disaster. So for me, there's been a lot of other focus, but nothing with oiled birds now, fortunately. It's not a fun part of work.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Well, thank you for all your work on that. I do have to say I don't know any, and I'm not a believer. I follow what the evidence is and my own sightings. I'm not going to, it's kind of funny to me that, so the LOS, I've been labeled as a charlatan because I haven't submitted my sightings and recordings to the Louisiana Bird Records Committee, but they have a very clear, after the Cullivan sighting, they wrote, the committee believes that an Ivory-bill sighting will only be accepted if it has a video or photo and with multiple observers. And that's certainly their prerogative. I don't know why they're raking me over the coals I've told them that. I deal with Fish and Wildlife Service and Cornell and who's ever interested. I respect them. It just has nothing to do with the Ivory-bill. And again, they set their own parameters. But I do think don't you think it's strange, Melanie, that I don't know any people who think the Ivory-bill persists who would turn on their heels and walk away from someone who thinks the Ivory-bill doesn't exist. I'd have to say the heat is largely on the other side, but I've never understood that. And we'll never have to, I guess. But
I've seen heat both ways. I've been treated with a fair amount of disrespect a few times about this, but I certainly see a lot of defensiveness both directions. So I wouldn't say that's a one direction thing, not in my experience.
Thanks.
Especially if you fly a little bit under the radar and people think you might be the other direction. You really hear it differently if you're not leading with your own story, you hear both sides a lot more, I think.
That's a really interesting perspective. I think I've lost that. I'll introduce myself. I'm David Sibley. Maybe not many people know what he looks like.
Good luck with that, Matt.
I've tried to get him on because obviously, like you said, and this is what saddens me is we're all on the same team, right? We're all for conservation. We're all for birds. We just differ about a species. That's what it's so crazy making to me. But I don't spend much time worried about it anymore. But thanks, Melanie. That's a super helpful perspective.
Yeah. One thing on that, though. Yes, we're all on the same team. Yes, we all are for conservation. And again, I can play devil's advocate against myself all night long. You would be amazed at how well I can argue with what I just said. But for real, the decision that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service made to accept that the Ivory-billed woodpecker was alive back then led to, and I don't know specific details, so I'm winging this a bit, millions of dollars that could have gone to other conservation and other research and other projects being redirected toward Ivory-billed priorities. Every decision like this, it's not a we're all on the same team necessarily. Ideally, yes, but the devil is in the details. And when the devil is in millions of dollars, then, again, personalities, genders, millions of dollars toward research and toward conservation and toward land use. It's high stakes. It's super high stakes. It's high stakes for David. It's high stakes for tons and tons and tons of people. So, people make field guides without a bird, and people do or don't get invited into a search, and people on a search do or don't see things or hear things or, get acknowledged. And yeah, it rolls up into lots of messy human stuff. And it's how it is.
But really, Melly, thank you so much for that. Any other questions? You want to unmute yourself?
Hey, Matt.
Oh, hey, Roshan.
So a few weeks ago, I was filming a pileated woodpecker, and there are some interesting frames in that video.
So what did you learn? Because
so in one of the frames, the wing looks entirely white. It's very unusual. I can't find a black trailing edge. It's just one frame. The bird is descending slightly. But I can't pick out a black trailing edge on one of the wings.
That's science. Okay, that's one bit of data, and that might be relevant. That is relevant. And again, the more data we have, just for instance, this wasn't a big reward compared to our $12,000 reward for leading us to an active cavity. I put a $30 reward on the internet for someone who could show us a pileated woodpecker in low level flight for the longest distance. So this is the kind of thing that we need to have higher thinking. There are many people in the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. There are many biologists I've never seen a pileated fly low and straight in level flight for a long time and make huge zooms. But Roshan, that's the kind of extra data we need. So, for instance, to glom onto your point, the issue, David, about the sound that the wings make in Tensas, just over the last 3 months, I've heard wing whir from pileateds. Now, it's been a little unusual. The first one it literally made a 90-degree turn when it saw me turned over the river, but it could make a sound with the wings. And so, just for those, Tanner described the Ivory-bill as being wooden winged and sounding like a ruffed grouse. And so, in Tensas, when I had heard a wing whir like that, I thought it was an Ivory-bill, but now I have to admit that I can't fairly distinguish that from what I heard from a pileated, only because I don't have enough data points. I haven't heard, both those for many times. So Roshan, keep collecting the data. That's the way to go. Yeah.
Oh, and have you found those South Carolina images that John Williams presented yet?
I have. In fact, I'm gonna send you tomorrow. I'll send it to you. Have you done an aspect ratio? Just for those of you playing at home, just so I can be clear, it's just so great to have David and Guy, who I think is with us. Guy Luneau, David's brother, presented earlier, and he had an excellent analysis of aspect ratio. So did you look at that, Roshan?
Yes, I've done that for Colin's videos.
Yeah.
I would like to look at it for these South Carolina images.
Okay, please do. Do you need? Well, we'll talk. No time like the present. Do you need anything else, or do you have everything you need to do the analysis?
I think I've got everything. Yeah, because I've got the book, so I have the standard values.
Great. Well, let us know. And I'll just add again, Roshan, in terms of science, what you just said. I thought Mike Collins has a still of a shaggy crested woodpecker, and I thought the shaggy crest was exclusive of pileated. But again, I saw a pileated the other day. And, maybe he was curious about something, but the crest looked shaggy for a little while. So prior to me saying that was, oh, that's got to be an Ivory-bill because the crest is shaggy. But and there's Audubon, the image, what we think is probably the immature, does have a shaggy crest. But obviously, the jury's out on that one. But thank you so much. Yeah, we'll talk about this.
Yeah.
Great. Any other questions? You can unmute yourself or go ahead.
I'm sorry. Hi, this is Eric. This is a question for David. I believe you mentioned earlier in your presentation about the famous Cornell nest hole video, and I think you had indicated that nest had failed. Could you provide a little more detail on that, if possible?
Not a lot more, I don't think. The nest failed. It seems like, and again, you'd probably have to read some fine print. It might be in Tanner's book. I don't know. It's a long time ago.
But I think
it
had to jump up. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
They had ants in it, right? Didn't they discover ants in it? And I don't know if that's the reason it failed, but even Nancy Tanner was saying that they definitely disturbed the birds. The birds were well aware they were there, and they didn't care for it much, and they were acting abnormally, according to her.
And Sonny Boy was the chick that was inside that nest. Is that correct?
It was a different nest. It was 1938.
Okay, that was a different nest. Okay, thank you.
Although it's worth telling the story that Jim Tanner climbed up to look in the nest and out flew Sonny Boy. Well, flew is the operative thing that Sonny Boy couldn't do. It was a fledgling. So Jim Tanner is watching in horror as maybe the last young Ivory-bill goes plummeting to its death, but it thankfully Sonny Boy hit some foliage and survived. Can you imagine? There was a question, David. There was a question about scaling in Bayou de View, or Bobby, or anybody who wants to answer this. Tanner cites lots of scaling as being indicative of Ivory-bills. And David, thank you for that. I will ask the people at Tensaw, where I'm going tomorrow, about if we can find the originals. But back to the question, did Bayou de View in particular, did the hot zone in Arkansas particularly have lots of scaling?
I mean, there's scaling there, but you get out in the woods and there's scaling in lots of places. And that's why I was picking Nancy Tanner's brain for that. This was actually before 2004 when I talked to her, but we had seen it down in the Pearl. We'd seen it in the south end of the White River Refuge. Since some really extensive stripping in the White River Refuge. And we put a camera on it, and nobody ever came back. So unless they come back and do it, and even if they come back and do it, you're not sure they're the ones that did it in the first place.
Right.
But I was trying to get some more forensic type data, some close-up photos to see if you could tell by the type of stripping or type of gouging or whatever. Never got anywhere with that because we didn't really have a picture of known Ivory-bill scaling up close enough with enough detail and measurement to be able to pin it on any of the other scaling.
I was laughing because what we really need is Ivory-bill graffiti. Ivory-bill was here. So one of we're always looking for patterns and frequently frustrated. David, I sent you a while ago, I think, and you wrote back very promptly that I've noticed, really looks like somebody took a screwdriver. I've noticed only in Louisiana have I seen this, and in southern Arkansas. This that's not cross-hatching, but it looks to be an odd way of cutting through the wood. Do you know what I'm talking about? You had one on your website specifically. So I'm always asking people who were in non-Ivory-bill areas, right? Like if somebody in Pennsylvania could say, oh, well, the pileated do that way. So have you come to a conclusion about this is Ivory-bill scaling and that's not Ivory-bill scaling as a general rule?
No, not at all. And still, I feel as lost as I was 20 years ago in trying to figure that out.
I think I'm more lost because I think that's what always happens is, we come up with this is definitely the pattern. I've hit upon it. No, other things can do that. So, David, can you see any chat that I'm looking away from that you want to answer? And again, anybody want to unmute themselves? That'd be great.
Hey, Matt, I have a question if I can.
Hey, Russ.
Good. How are you, man?
Good. Yeah.
Thanks for putting these on. I really enjoyed them.
Sure.
Made it to the last 3. I think I missed last week's partly, but I love it. It's great. Thank you. I appreciate that. David, thanks for coming on and talking. Really enjoyed it. I've spent countless hours poring over your video. Fascinating piece of footage. My question is, I could have sworn at some point, somewhere along the line, a few years ago, some photos were taken. I don't know if they were trail cam photos or somebody put some photos up of a pileated woodpecker that had an unusual amount of white coloring on it. It had, like, I think the wings were white. I don't remember exactly what. I remember seeing the photos, and I think it was from the Pearl River. Does anybody remember that? Am I imagining this? Or was there an unusually colored, aberrant, maybe leucistic looking pileated woodpecker in the area at that time? Did that happen?
I don't know the one you're talking about. There was not one in Arkansas at the time. We did, however, have one pileated woodpecker not far from where this video was taken that I saw, and I saw it had like a little extra one white feather. It was just strange looking. It was out of place. And I saw that bird probably on 5 or 6 different trips, just repeatedly in the same area. So we figured if there was something out there that was massively white or leucistic or whatever, that we would have probably seen it multiple times, unless it flew away and got eaten right away. But that didn't seem like a very likely event.
Russ, I think I saw the thing you're talking about, but it was yes, it had much more white than a pileated would have, but it didn't seem to have it in a pattern like an ivory-bill. But I don't remember being conclusive one way or the other. But I mean, it's a good question. Leucism does exist, of course.
My memory is not what it used to be, so that's why I'm asking. I just don't remember the nature of the photo. It may not have even been in the area. My memory seems to remember it being from the area, but certainly it wouldn't be the first time I've got it way off. It was a decade, it was 15 years ago probably or whatever.
Any other questions that people want to unmute themselves for? This has been fantastic, David. I really appreciate it. We're going on 2 hours here.
Hey, Matt, this is Chris.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, I just want to say to everybody involved with the 2005, including David, obviously, thank you. Thank you for all your hard work, your openness with sharing everything, and your unselfishness, not only in sharing then, but now. I just understand that there's people out there who greatly appreciate everyone's work, including Bobby and Melanie as well.
Yeah. I want to echo that, Chris. Really, all of y'all, David, Melanie, Bobby, Tim, who's not, and Fitz, having the guts to stick it, to really stick his neck out. Y'all done great service for humanity. I'm sorry, I'm just scrolling to the chat. Anybody else? Mostly, David, I don't know if you can say it's mostly how fantastic the presentation was, which, you did a fantastic job, and I'm glad we were going to preserve this. David did mention to me before we did a trial run through, and he said that, David, was it correct? You didn't have any of your wonderful presentations before that were recorded?
Yeah, we did. In the year after the announcement, we did about 100 in 1 year. So about twice a week we were giving presentations. But it was mostly the same presentation over and over again. This one tonight was something that I put together. A little bit of it was from those previous presentations, but I borrowed some from one of Fitz's presentation and put together a lot of other stuff. And it was fun doing it. It was, like Melanie said, a lot of water under a lot of bridges since then. I was reading stuff I found stuff I didn't even remember that I had. So it was a great exercise for me, and it made me realize I need to do something to put more of this out there so people can see it. Because it's just right now just hiding away on my hard drive, and be better off if people could read some of it.
Hey, David, I had a good question from Rob, but it leads into this. So Rob asked this, your sightings led, that there was a 2004 and 2005 expedition. Obviously, your video was from 2004, and the announcement was 2005. I know Fitz said that they were very good audio recordings from 2009, and you might have answered this. Do you know what's going on in the Bayou de View area since 2004 and 5?
Well, we did official, advertised whatever searches in 06, 07 and 07 and 8. And I think that was the last year of them officially, but there's still people out there here and there doing their own thing. But I'm not on top of that at all. I don't know. Bobby probably has a better idea of that than I do about who's out there and when and how often. But I haven't been much.
And I don't want to. I mean, I hope this isn't breaching of confidence to say that you were out there before. You were in 2003, right? You were searching for Ivorybills.
Yeah. I got after the 2002 Zeiss search in the Pearl River area. I came back kind of fired up about finding Ivorybills and looked at the map and thought, oh, the White River Refuge looks like a good place. Never been there. Grew up in Arkansas, lived here most of my life and never been there. And I thought I'd go there. And I took a group of like 7 people down there in January of 2003. And that's where I said we found a lot of scaling, a lot of interesting stuff, but nothing to report. And sometime shortly after that, Mary Scott went down there and had a sighting. And then Mary Scott was mentioned earlier as who Gene was told to contact, and she told Gene to contact Tim Gallagher, and that kind of got the ball rolling.
That's great. Any other questions? Because the big woods, of course, are gorgeous, but I think it's important and this is the problem I think that I have communicating to people who don't understand the issue. The ivory-bill lives in a particular habitat, and I've tried this analogy on Judy Chucker earlier today. So it's like saying there's a fish called the foxfish, and we know it lived in the Great Lakes, and we've done an adequate survey of the lower half of Lake Michigan. We haven't searched the rest of the Great Lakes. I think that's where we are with the ivory-bill. Obviously, I know what I've seen, but that's why the Fish and Wild, everyone who knows anything about it would have to say that it's premature to declare the ivory-bill extinct, simply for what you just observed, David, that you really hadn't been into those woods before. And these are not areas where birders go. The places where I've seen ivory-bills, I've only seen one person whom I didn't know, meaning someone who wasn't on a search with us, and that was a hog hunter. So these are not places that are traveled extensively by people who would know what ivory-bills were. I was interviewing someone who said, very convincingly to me that he had seen ivory-bills on the Tensaw in the 60s, and neither he nor his grandfather knew what an ivory-bill was. They just knew it wasn't like that other big black, when it's perched, black-backed woodpecker. So, but that's been part of our mission with, in particular, the Louisiana wilds, is crisscrossing Louisiana, trying to advise the public about it. So when people say you need extraordinary evidence for extraordinary claims, I don't think it's very extraordinary to think that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service hasn't been told about all the ivory-bills, because, as you might imagine, people who are very worried about losing their hunting rights or ownership rights, they're not going to tell Fish and Wildlife Service or the New York Times or Cornell about the ivory-billed woodpeckers on their property. So that's a real problem. It is what it is. So, and it doesn't help to have what's the bias that Chris said, the reporting outcome bias, that those of us who report we've seen ivory-bills, we do get castigated. And people who mean well will write to me and say, you shouldn't say you've seen an ivory-bill. Well, if we don't report what we've seen, the fact that I report what I've seen is evidence. You don't have to accept it as proof, right? But at some point, and I agree with you completely, David, about Mr. James, who was the Arkansas expert. For me, just the idea that 7 trained observers saw this bird that they identified as an ivory-bill, I find a hard time explaining that any other way. And Chris Haney makes the point, I think this is really funny. So if the ivory-bill is roughly indistinguishable from pileated, how do we know people aren't seeing lots of ivory-bills and calling it pileated? So statistically, that's got to be happening, right? Or it could. But any other questions? This has been fantastic. We've kept you along. David did start to beg off about Valentine's Day, but I know you got permission to be with us tonight, and please thank your wife for that, because we really appreciate it. This has been humbling for me. I've had tears in my eyes sometimes just listening to you. We really appreciate you. Any other questions?
I wondered if I could just share something with you guys. The other day, I posted a wood burning that I did of an Ivory-billed woodpecker on a cutting board.
Yeah.
And while this meeting was going on, I worked on another one. So I think it's done. So I'm going to show you guys if you're interested. It's not an Ivory-bill, but it's an Imperial Woodpecker.
Wow. That is beautiful work. Wow.
It's a charcuterie board.
I'm sorry, it's
it's a charcuterie board, like a cutting board, a little serving board. So I figured I did the Ivory-bill, and I was inspired to do the Imperial because, and I'm with woodpecker people here, so I thought you guys might enjoy it.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. So that's the thing, we attract so many talented people here. And that's what's fun. That's what I've really enjoyed is just this interchange. You know, again, I've now learned from David Luneau, and I've learned from Roshan. And, you know, it's we all learn from each other. So if
I've learned a lot.
Yeah. David, any closing thoughts you want to give?
Just to thank you for inviting me, and thank all of you for coming and listening, and go out there and get back out in the woods, out from in front of our desks. Maybe I'm preaching to the choir, but maybe I'm preaching to myself to get out there and do something.
Well, come search for this. We'll be out there for 5 years. So we really appreciate you. Paul said, and I thought this was great. What a loving service you did for us. Paul Jasek said, the black and white movie tonight with the sound of the woodpeckers synced was great. That really, really made the difference. Thanks so much for putting that together. So thank you all so much. Thanks again, David. Good night, y'all.